I'm going to hop in here and introduce myself real quick. This is Claire with Lion Brand. Like Felicia said, if you have any questions over what we're covering in class, I can answer them in the chat or I'll pass them on to Darren so he can demonstrate for us on screen. If you need the handout again, I'll also go ahead and put that in the chat a couple times so you can make sure and save that for future reference. Even though it's a real hot Monday here, Darren's being brave, putting on all of that yarn. So hopefully everyone has been practicing and is ready to learn us today to learn how to purl. All right, we'll let Darren take it away now.
Okay, welcome to class, everyone. So last week, if you were in our class last week, we learned everything we needed to learn to make this cowl, which is very nice to have. Today, we're going to learn how to do the purl stitch. And once we learn how to combine the knit and the purl stitch and learn how to work them together, we're going to be able to make lots of different types of fabrics. And today we're going to learn about three different types of fabrics that you can make using the knits and the purls and how they kind of work together. And then after you get comfortable with these three fabrics we're going to talk about today, there's like a whole world of different kinds of textures and fabrics that you can explore with your knitting. So once you learn how to do the knit stitch and the purl stitch, you're well on your way to be making all kinds of crazy textures and all kinds of fun patterns. So, and then next week, we're going to learn everything you need to learn to make these mittens. Now, I know these seem a little bit intimidating right now from where you're sitting, but after you've made this hat, you can see the mitten and the hat are pretty much exactly the same shape, except for the thumb. And that's what we're going to learn next week is how to add this thumb. So after you've practiced a little bit and made the hat, this mitten will be a piece of cake. And I know that might seem a little challenging right now, and it would be right now. But after you've had a chance to practice, trust me, you'll be ready for that mitten next week. So, so if we want to go ahead and switch to the view of my hands, we'll go ahead and get started. We do have a lot to cover. So just a quick review, a little bit about yarn and yarn selection. Today I'm demonstrating with this yarn called Wool Ease Thick and Quick. And this is made by Lion Brand, and it's available on lionbrand.com or on michaels.com. It comes in a wide variety of different colors and prints and like different mixes and tweeds. So really, I can't even tell you what a great selection of color choices this yarn is available in. It's available in a size number 6, which is a super bulky. Now, yarn is available in many sizes. Sometimes it's as thin as thread, and sometimes it's like even 2 or 3 times as thick as this. 0 is the smallest, and then a 7 is the biggest, and this one is a size 6. Now, it's very important when you select yarn that you're looking at what needle size is recommended. And this one is recommending a US size 13, or for everybody else in the world, a 9mm. So just be aware that there are 2 different ways of describing the thickness of a knitting needle. US, we have like a numbering system, and size 13, which is this size. Everyone else uses the metric system, which is an actual scientific unit of measurement. And a size 13, US 13 is a 9mm. So just know there are 2 different ways of describing the thickness of the needle. Okay, here's just some other options. Woolies comes in some really great colors. Another yarn that I like to teach with is called Hometown Bonus Bundle. Now this one's 100% acrylic, so if you're allergic to wool, this might be a good option. This Wool Ease has 20% wool and 80% acrylic. So just a little bit of information about that. You can always pop into Michaels and look at the colors in person and feel them and see which one is best for you and your project. So any questions about needle choice, yarn selection, anything about that, because these are all very important things. You can sometimes go up or down one needle size, but you really do want to kind of keep it pretty close to whatever is being suggested. So do you have anything to add, Claire? Any other tidbits of knowledge?
Yeah, I was going to say you mentioned, you can go up or down in needle size. I know at least in common US sizes, it's a pretty big jump from 13 down to the next size. So that might not be so feasible, but you could probably make it work with a 15 if that's all you have.
Yeah, so but if you're just practicing or if you're making maybe a scarf, sometimes if it's looser or tighter, it's okay. So for beginning projects, not as crucial, I don't think so. All right, so let's jump right in if there are no other questions. And so we're going to learn how to make the purl stitch today. And just a real quick review. I do want to show you the knit stitch so we can contrast the two. So for a knit stitch, you enter the stitch going front to back this way. And then you wrap your yarn going counterclockwise. And then this motion is kind of like either pulling it or scooping it through. And then you transfer it over. So this is kind of what the knit stitch looks like. And this is what we did last week. So, oh, if you want to practice along with me, all I did here was I just cast on like 15 stitches. No, I did 12. I cast on 12 stitches and I just knitted a couple of rows just to give me something to work into. But this is just practice. So if you just want to cast on like 10 or 15 stitches or something, just to work along, you can do that. That's fine. Nothing special here. So the knit stitch is you enter the stitch front to back, wrap the yarn, pull it through, transfer it over. Okay. Now the purl stitch is quite a bit different. It's very similar, but there are some significant differences. So the first thing that's different with the purl stitch is you want to bring your yarn forward. And so now my yarn, instead of being in the back, I'm bringing it forward. So now that the yarn is in the front closer to me, that's very important for a purl. And instead of entering the stitch like this, like you do for a knit stitch, I'm going to enter the stitch this direction. So I'm kind of diving into the stitch, or I'm entering it from the top going down. Sometimes you might think about it I'm going from the right, I'm approaching from the right, and I'm going to the left. So I'm entering the right side of the stitch, coming out of the left side. So we're kind of diving. I like to think of it diving in, and then you want to make an X. Okay, my yarn's in the front. And I'm still going to wrap my yarn counterclockwise. So you're always wrapping counterclockwise. So if you hold your yarn or your needles like this, and that's the face of a clock, that's 3 o'clock. So hold your yarn at the 3, 3, 2, 1, blast off. So that's counterclockwise. 3, 2, 1, counterclockwise. And now this motion, I'm going to push that strand of yarn back through to create that loop, which is going to be my stitch. And then you transfer it over. So that is my purl stitch. And I'm going to do this several times and we'll talk about it if you get stuck anywhere along the way. So now that I've made one purl stitch, my yarn is still in the front. So my yarn is still in the correct place. I can make as many as I need to or as I want to. So I'm going to dive into that stitch, wrap my yarn counterclockwise, push that loop or push that strand of yarn back through to make my new loop, transfer it over. All right. So there's a little rhyme you can repeat to yourself to help you remember. You go under the fence. Whoops, sorry. Under the fence. Grab a sheep. Back we go, and off it leaps. So under the fence, grab a sheep, back we go, and off it leaps. Or Jack goes in the back door, puts on a scarf, goes back outside, then jumps off. So it's just 4 simple steps. 1, and I'm going to wrap it with my left hand now. 2, 3, 4. So you can wrap it with your left hand like I do normally, or you can wrap it with your right hand like a lot of other people do, and you get the same stitch. You just want to make sure you're entering it in the right direction, wrapping your yarn in the correct direction, and then your stitch will be fine. Okay. I'm sure there must be questions, so I'm going to finish this row and listen for any questions that there might be.
I'll give everybody a chance to type if they need to. Yep, Darren's going to show this stitch several more times. Oh, got my tongue twisted.
Several more times. There we go. Now I finished the row, and so that last purl stitch wants to be treated the same as everybody else. So you just finish it up. I like to go ahead and kind of organize everything after I finish my row, give things a little snug to kind of even things out a little bit, and then you turn and you start on the next side. Now, when I first did it, I showed you the knit stitch a couple of times first. So now I'm going to show you how to start a row with the purl stitch, because I started the last row with a knit stitch. So we're going to start it with a purl stitch. It's still the same stitch. There's nothing really exciting to see. The first thing we're going to do is position our yarn in the correct place. So if I were going to do a knit stitch, my yarn would be in the back. If I'm going to do a purl stitch, my yarn should be in the front. Now you don't want to pull it too tight and scrunch everything up so you can't see what you're doing. So just gently lay it in the front and make sure you're not scrunching up anything. And then the same thing as we've been doing. Dive into that stitch. So you enter the stitch, wrap the yarn, and then push it through, transfer it over. Okay. Are there any particular questions? Is there a particular spot you're not really able to see what I'm doing? How do we feel about this?
I think if people are practicing and this one feels a little awkward, that is perfectly normal. It's a different set of motions from the knit stitch, to be sure, and some people develop a preference for one versus the other.
Which one do you like better, Claire?
I don't really mind purling, but I definitely like knitting a little bit better.
I love to knit. I'm a knitter. I don't always love a lot of purl stitches. I mean, I don't mind it so much, but I do prefer the knit stitch.
I like combining them to make different textures, like we're going to get to a little bit later. That's when it gets fun.
That's the best part. Okay, I'd love to hear some questions from our students to make sure. Sometimes I'm explaining things and it doesn't come across on camera the way I like it to. So any questions to help clarify would be appreciated. Unless everyone's got it. Maybe everyone got it that fast. I certainly didn't when I was learning.
And when you're pushing the yarn through like that, you're trying to keep the needles in contact with each other, right?
Yeah, so it's nice. It makes it easier for you. The needles should really always be really close. My needles are usually touching. So when I enter that stitch, you can see my needles are touching each other. I wrap the yarn, and as I push that through, if you can see, but my needles are kind of always touching each other. And then you can pull it through. Kind of like if you're going to build a campfire, you rub two sticks together, right? They always have to be touching if you're rubbing two sticks together. So we're not trying to start a fire. We're not knitting that fast, but remember, keep your knitting needles always kind of touching each other or very close. I'm surprised there are no questions. I like to think I'm a good teacher, but I didn't think I was that good. So enter the stitch going from top to bottom, like that, or from approaching from the right, going, entering the stitch coming out the left side of the stitch. Wrap the yarn, and then push it back through, transfer it over. Wow, I can't believe they're.
Here's maybe more of a general question. What if your stitches are just getting tighter and tighter along the row or as you go?
Well, that's a very good question, actually. So there's a couple reasons why your stitches could be too tight. One reason is maybe you're just very tense and you're pulling your stitches very tight. So if you get very anxious, I'm going to do a few knit stitches in a row. So sometimes if you're feeling very anxious, sometimes I'll pull my stitches really tight. And sometimes after I've made a stitch, when I first started knitting, I would pull that very tight for some reason. I thought that was, a nice way to do it. And my stitches would get so tight that I could barely even move my needles. They were so tight. So try to keep a loose touch. Don't pull it tight. Allow it to have a little bit of slack. We're not trying to make it super duper tight. Another thing you could be doing that's making them very tight is if you're shaping your stitches down here on the points of your needle, so like down here, and you don't push it up. I'll do a couple like that. See, I'm shaping my stitches down here on the tip of the needle, and then by the time they get pushed up to the fattest part of the needle, there's not a lot of slack. And so they're very tight around this shaft of the needle, which is very thick. So what you want to do is you want to make sure when you're knitting or purling, you want to insert your needle kind of all the way to the fattest part, wrap your yarn around the fattest part of the needle, bring it through, and then push it up to the fattest part of the needle, and then transfer it over, and don't pull it tight. Now, if you're working super loose and you've got crazy loose stitches, you can snug it up a little, but make sure your stitches are sliding easily. And the same thing with purling. If you enter the stitch, make sure you're entering to the fattest part of the needle, wrap it around the fat part of the needle, and then when you push it through, bring it up and shape the stitch on the thicker part of the needle. And that should help you prevent really, really tight stitches. Now, some people just knit really, really tight, and that's fine. And in a situation like that, you could just go up a needle size. But sometimes, like Claire said, it's not just like going up 1 millimeter. Sometimes there's a bit of a jump. So it's not always a good solution, but it usually can work. Do you have any other tips for knitting too tight, Claire?
I think this person might have been specifically talking about the stitch on the very end of the row. And so I wondered if they might just be slipping that stitch every row without putting new yarn into it. So remember that end stitch and the beginning stitch, they want to be knit too.
Oh, like this stitch right here, this last stitch?
Yeah.
Yeah, so one thing that could happen, and this sometimes the pattern will tell you to do this, but we're not doing this today, is if you just slip that stitch over without knitting it. See, here's my working yarn, and it did not enter that stitch. And then when you turn it over and you work that, sometimes it gets very tight. Or maybe you slip it again, and then you're going to run into a lot of trouble. So make sure, unless if the pattern is instructing you to do something different, that you are treating that last stitch and the first stitch just like every other stitch. And then that should help keep everything nice and even. Now, there's always an example of, you'll be doing something differently in a different pattern, but, for today, we're knitting the first and the last stitches. Okay. So is everybody making nice purl stitches without any problems? I'm very excited if you are. It'd be pretty exciting. No question. So are we ready then to learn how to tell the difference between the knit and the purl after we've made them and talk a little bit about that, Claire?
Yeah, let's get to that because we're almost halfway through class already.
Okay.
So,
All right. So I've got some swatches to show you, and we're going to look at them. So last week, we learned how to make garter stitch, and this is garter stitch, and we just made it by knitting every stitch on every row. So we knitted the front, we knitted the back, and we created this beautiful fabric. It lays flat, it's kind of plush, kind of stretchy, so it's a very nice fabric. And this was created by making all knit stitches. And then this is another fabric. This is called stockinette stitch. And this might be what you think of when you think about knitted items. Like on this hat, the body of this hat is stockinette stitch. And probably most of your sweaters and like these mittens, you think about this nice smooth fabric as what people think of as knitted fabric. And that is one type of knitted fabric, and that's called stockinette stitch. We're going to learn how to make that today. Now, for stockinette stitch and for garter stitch, both of these are created by knitting by combining knits and purls. Now, that's kind of a tricky thing to say because we made these by only making knits. But let's talk a little bit about it. So first of all, so that right there, I've kind of isolated that one stitch. That is a knit stitch. And a knit stitch is kind of shaped like a V. So it's shaped like a V. And when you get a whole bunch of knit stitches together in a nice big field like this, it's a very smooth fabric. It's very smooth, and you look for these V shapes to find your knit stitch. Now, if I turn this over, it looks very different. So this side of the fabric looks very different than this side. This side of the fabric is all of my purl stitches. So to create stockinette stitch, I'm going to put knit stitches on one side and purl stitches on the other. Now, purl stitches are kind of, they're a little bit harder to tell. They're kind of shaped like you get these ridges or you get these bumps. So when you're learning about knitting, you're watching knitting videos or reading a magazine about knit stitches and how to make different things. Sometimes you'll hear a purl stitch being referred to as a purl bump, which is kind of this bump shape here, or a purl ridge, which is these ridges that go across. So the purls, and when I'm looking at them, it almost looks like they're going kind of like a wavy line going side to side or horizontal. And the knit stitches look like, to my eye, these V stitches, and they look more like they're stacked vertically on top of each other, right? So let's look at this garter stitch, which was made by knitting every stitch on every row. So there's a little secret. There's a secret about the knit and the purl, the secret life of the knits and the purls. And the secret is that the knit stitch and the purl stitch are the exact same stitch. They're exactly the same, except one is the front and one is the back. So the knit stitch and the purl stitch are the same stitch, but just one is the front and one is the back. They look different from the front and the back. You look different from the front and the back, and the knit stitch wants to be just like everybody else, so it also looks different on the front and the back. So I just made these knit stitches, so I know this is a knit stitch because I just did it. And if I look at it, I can see here, isolate that. See, there is my V shape, which indicates a knit stitch. Now, if I turn my work over, instead of a V shape, what I'm seeing is this bump. And so that is a purl stitch. So it's like a coin has heads and tails. Same coin, one side's heads and one side's tails. And the knit stitch is the same. One side is knit and one side is purl. When you're working on a project, it's very important that you know the difference, what the stitches are as you're coming to them. So I'm going to work this next stitch. And this next stitch right here is a purl stitch. And I know it's a purl stitch because I've got that bump, and it's kind of bumped right up against my needle. So I've got that purl stitch, I've got a bump, it's pressed up tight against my needle, so I know it is a purl stitch. Now, if I look at that exact same stitch on the other side, what I'm seeing is this V shape, and it actually hangs down below my needle. So that stitch right there is very different than the purl. So sometimes if you're not sure what you're looking at, I don't know if that's a knit or a purl, I can't quite tell. Let me look at the other side. Oh, I see the V shape there, so these are definitely knits. So sometimes looking at both sides can kind of help you figure it out, okay? Any questions about how to tell the difference between a knit and a purl? Because it is very important that you get comfortable with that. So I'm glad to review it again. Just remember though, whenever you're making a knit stitch, so I'm going to make a knit stitch next, make a knit stitch. I've made this knit stitch, but I've also created a purl stitch on the other side. So really you're working on both sides of your fabric, both sides of your project at the same time. So if I do a purl stitch on this side, I'm going to make a purl stitch. I just put a purl stitch. When I turn it over, just like magic, that purl stitch changed into a knit stitch. So front and back of the same stitch, one side is a knit and one side is a purl, right? Any questions about that? When I first learned how to knit and purl, for some reason that was very confusing for me. I couldn't figure it out. But I didn't have a teacher, I just taught myself. So I'm glad to answer any questions to help you guys along.
I know a lot of people picture it or, refer to it sort of as like two sides of a coin, where it's all one coin, but you have a distinct front and a distinct back.
Yeah. And you look different from the front and the back. A coin looks different on the front and the back, and so does the knit stitch. So, it's just normal, nothing unusual. So how do we feel about that? Everyone feels pretty good about that? Because it is
Yeah.
very important that you can tell the difference, because in a pattern, it will tell you, to do different things, and you have to be able to look at your work. It's called reading your knitting. So you have to be able to, eventually you'll get better at it. So here's a knit, here's a knit. I know these are knits because they're kind of V-shaped, they're smoother, and they hang down below the needle until I get right here. Now that's a purl because it's not a V shape, it's bumped up tight against the needle. So if I'm just playing here, I'm just making it up as I go, but there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 knit stitches and then a purl. And then there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 knit stitches and then a purl. And then 1, 2, 3 knit stitches. So, sometimes you can arrange knits and purls like this, and they can create a different pattern, or sometimes you can use them to draw a picture. You can arrange them to be in the shape of a circle or a star or something. And your pattern might say knit 5 stitches, do 1 purl stitch and then knit 5. So I did 1 purl, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Whoops, I've got 6. So that must mean I should have put my purl stitch in a different place, and then you might have to go back and fix it. But it's really important that you can tell the difference, because if you made a mistake, then you can find where that mistake is. Right, so it's really important. So if you guys need any additional help, any questions? Are we ready to see?
We
Ribbing yet?
we
Maybe
did
move
have a
on.
request to see the purl stitch again, but I know we'll get to that as we show these other stitch patterns. So we
Okay.
can just stop and pause.
All right then. So let me go ahead and I'll make sure I'm not skipping anything. We showed the knit, we showed the purl. So Alrighty, so I've got my stockinette stitch, I've got my garter stitch. Now I'm going to show you, this is a little swatch. It's knit one, purl one, and it creates this other fabric. So knit one, purl one. I'm going to teach you how to do that now. And then we're going to look at all three different fabrics and talk about some differences and some pluses and minuses and how we can use them. Okay. All right. So for this little exercise, I'm going to do knit two, purl two. I think knit two, purl two is a good little practice exercise. So I'm going to enter my stitch for knitting. I'm going to knit two. Now I'm going to purl two. So I have to come to a full stop, open my needles, bring the yarn to the correct position. So now my yarn's in the correct position for purling. And I'm going to purl two. Now you could purl as many as you want or as many as the pattern is instructing you, but I'm going to purl two. Now I need to knit two. So come to a full stop, open your needles, reposition your yarn, and now I'm going to knit two. So it's very important that you open your needles and you bring your yarn in between. So let me show you what happens if you do it wrong. So I did my knit two, I'm going to do purl two. So I'm going to enter my stitch for purling, but oh wait, my yarn is in the wrong position. So I'm going to bring my yarn to the right position for purling, and I'm going to do my purl stitch, do my two purl stitches. But look what happened. So because I started the stitch incorrectly, what happens is I get this extra strand of yarn wrapped around my needle. So if you look down at my stitches, you can see that's kind of an angle. It's moving on a diagonal, so something doesn't look right. And then also underneath of it, there's a hole because it's not connected to anything underneath of it. So that's not right. So what happens is this is actually a stitch that you could be using later on. It's called a yarn over. And what a yarn over does for us is it adds a stitch and it creates a hole. Now, if you arrange these holes in the shape of a flower, now you've made lace. But if you've done it, on accident, it's not something that you're going to be happy about later on. So I'm going to take these stitches out and I'm going to do it the correct way. So bring my yarn in between my needles. And now I can do as many purls as I want. So remember, it's kind of like playing football or soccer or hockey. You have to go into the goal. You have to go in between. If you go this way, you're not going to get a point. And if you go this way, you're not going to score a goal. You have to go in between. So either in between that direction or in between this direction. Right? Any questions about ribbing? And you can do knit one, purl one, knit two, purl two, knit 10, purl three, any pattern of ribbing that you choose. But this is how you switch between knits and purls. Any questions?
We did have someone who recognized that accidental yarn over made there. So yes, it's a common mistake, but like I said, one is pretty easy to fix.
Yeah, it's a common mistake, especially when you're just learning. It's very easy to do. And let me do one. Hold on one second. This is kind of a nice thing to know too. Let me just do one and I'll leave it and I'll show you what you can do. So I made a big mistake. I put a yarn over in. Okay, I'm going to, whoops, I'm doing it wrong. Trying to hurry and I make mistakes. Okay. All right, so now I'm finished that row. And I just want to show you, I finished my row. I did 2 purls to finish. But when I turn my work over, just like magic, they turned into knit stitches. So just remember that if you're doing 1 stitch on your work, when you turn it over, you're going to have the opposite stitch on the other side. So now I'm going to do my ribbing. I did a knit there. I should have done a purl, but look, here's this yarn over. I made that yarn over by mistake. If you get to this point in your work and you see that you made a yarn over by mistake, one thing you can do is you can just let it drop off your needle and then continue with your work. And it will make a bit of a loose stitch right there, but it's better than having that hole and that added stitch. So if you recognize it, right the next time, but if you ended up knitting that stitch by mistake, then it's knitted into your work and it's kind of there until you rip it out. So, all right. Any questions about knitted ribbing or alternating between knits and purls?
Wait for everybody to put their needles down and get back on their keyboards if needed.
Then we'll talk about these fabrics. So an interesting little tidbit about these fabrics, I pretty much have the exact same number of stitches in rows in all of these, but why are they shaped different? That's kind of a strange thing, right? Well, garter stitch tends to kind of squish down this direction. It lays flat and it doesn't curl, but it does tend to squish down a little bit. And that makes the fabric a little thicker and it makes it feel a little spongier. But if I were to kind of stretch it out, you can see it's pretty much the same size as this stockinette stitch one. But the fabric's not going to stay stretched out. It's always going to kind of squish up a little bit. And that's what makes it a nice fabric because it's kind of plush and soft. Now, stockinette stitch always does this. It always rolls. And if you have a big enough piece of it, sometimes it rolls this way too, and it'll roll kind of in all directions. So stockinette stitch always rolls. The knit stitch is a little bit looser and the purl stitch is a little bit tighter, and they just all kind of curl up together. They just kind of roll up together like that. There's nothing to be done about it. The only thing you can do to keep stockinette stitch from rolling is to staple it to a wall. And then when you take the staples out, it rolls back up. So there's no way to win with stockinette stitch. It's just going to roll. Now, you've probably had sweaters before where it has a rolled neck. Like you have a little rolled neck, and that's really cute. It's super cute. But if you're not expecting it to roll up, usually you could be disappointed. So just knowing that it is going to roll, and if you can work that into your design, or if maybe you'll be disappointed. So just know that. And this one is knit one, purl one ribbing, and ribbing tends to pull in this direction. So it's kind of elastic. It pulls in, so it's more narrow than the stockinette stitch. So you can see it's actually a little bit more narrow, but it's the same stitches if I spread it out. And it lays flat and it's a little bit more elastic, and it holds its shape very nice. Now for stockinette stitch, we love stockinette stitch. It might be the most, I think it's very pretty. I don't know if it's the prettiest stitch, but it is very pretty. So to make it so that we can use stockinette stitch in our projects, usually what happens is you end up putting ribbing along the edge. So if you've got ribbing along the edge, the ribbing doesn't roll, and that prevents the stockinette stitch from rolling. So like on mittens and on this hat, you end up with this ribbing along the edge, and that keeps it from rolling. And then because it's seamed, it's sewn together, it keeps it from rolling side to side. And that's kind of how we have to, you could put garter stitch along the edge, and that would do the same thing. It would keep it from rolling. There's some other tricks you can do. You can kind of fold it under and sew it, but you do have to do some kind of a treatment or something to keep it from rolling up. What do you have to add to that, Claire? Do you have any suggestions on stockinette stitch rolling?
Yes, I would say, just like you said, it's a fact of stockinette stitch life. Don't try to fight it, and you will only end up frustrated.
Yeah.
It does make a beautiful, sort of fabric. It's great for sweaters and hats and things. But like Darren said, if you want to try to make a scarf or a blanket with it, you do have to put a pretty large border on to make sure it stays flat.
Yeah. And if I have a shawl that I made that I did a lot of it in stockinette stitch, and I didn't do an edge, and it rolls up quite a bit, but I made it so extra wide that it rolls up and it's fine. Like the whole thing, it's not going to roll up the whole thing in a tube. It's probably like 3 feet wide, and it probably rolls in a good 3 or 4 inches, but then it kind of stops rolling. So if you work it into a design, if you plan it out and you make a little extra for it, then that's fine. But you do want to plan ahead for that. And usually a designer will have made these decisions for you, but I've seen a lot of scarves where you have a border like this of garter stitch, and then you have a nice big scarf stockinette and then another border on the other side. But if you don't make that border wide enough, what happens is that folds over and then it still rolls up. So it's just not a big stockinette stitch scarf is usually just going to roll up and make you unhappy, unless if you really knew about it. So any questions about any of these fabrics, how to make them, how to use them, any questions at all? No question.
No, I think we're good to go.
Wow, this is the advanced group. I swear this must be a very advanced group. Let me see what I'm doing now. Garter stitch, because I feel like we're moving very fast, which is not something I'm used to. So did I skip anything, Claire? Are we ready to look at the pattern? I feel like I covered everything, right?
I think that was everything in the handout.
Yeah, we're just moving really fast. One thing I am going to mention, and I'm not going to demonstrate it, but for like independent learning, like future learning, if any of our students want to Google, it's called the Norwegian purl. Now that's a complete different way of doing the purl, completely different than what I showed you today. So there's always more than one way to accomplish it, but it's a different way. It's a fun way. So if you want to, for future learning, you can Google the Norwegian purl and get yourself in all kinds of trouble learning that, but it's a lot of fun. I actually really enjoy it. So have you ever done the Norwegian purl, Claire?
I think I've tried it maybe once or twice, but I didn't practice consistently enough to get good at it.
Yeah, I committed to it for a couple of projects and I actually got pretty good at it. So it's kind of fun. It's kind of a fun choice. So, all right, so let's look at this hat. So we want to make this hat. So the pattern, it's a free knitting pattern from Lion Brand Yarn. If you don't have this pattern, you can always print it. If you go to lionbrand.com, it's free to print. You can print it. You can either put in this code L60047, or if you just type in Heartland thick and quick knit level 2 hat, it'll bring it up and you can print it for free. It's always available for free. And it's a beginning level 1, so it's for beginners. It's a good choice. One size will fit most people. The finished circumference is 18 inches, but a hat does stretch to fit, lots of different sizes. Okay, so the materials. The materials requested are Lion Brand Heartland Thick and Quick Yarn Redwood. Now, I didn't use that yarn. I used, actually for this hat here, I used Hometown Bonus Bundle, which is a little bit bigger than the original yarn, but it's not that much bigger. It's pretty much the same size. And then for this one, which I'm going to show you how to finish later, I used Woolly's Thick and Quick. So you can switch up the yarn if you're sure that the yarns are very similar. So one thing you can do is if you don't have this yarn or you can't find it, you can, if you Google it, and it'll bring up the statistics of the yarn and show you what it is. You just want to make sure that it's very similar to this one or to whichever one you're going to be switching to. Okay. Lion brand knitting needle size 11. I used a 13 and it's, it's still pretty good. It does make the hat slightly bigger, so you might want to use an 11 or depending on your yarn choice. Even if you use this bigger yarn, you could still use a size 11 needle or a size 13. If you're making it for an adult that has very thick hair or a large head, use this yarn with a size 13. But if it's for someone with a smaller head, maybe a teenager or somebody with thin hair, you could use this same yarn, but use a size 11 needle. So I always like people to know that you don't have to do everything you're told. Sometimes you can just kind of do whatever you want. You might be sorry, maybe there'll be lessons to be learned, but that's kind of where we are, right? We need a large-eyed blunt needle, and that's for weaving in the ends, for finishing, and for seaming. So it has a large enough eye for yarn. It's not sharp. We're going between the strands of yarn. We're not piercing them. So large-eyed blunt needle, a tapestry needle, a yarn needle, a darning needle. Sometimes you'll different things you can call them. Now gauge. Gauge can become very complicated, and it later on becomes very, very important. But all we need to know for today is that 11 stitches equal about 4 inches. If your stitches are the exact same size as the designer stitches, your hat will be the exact same size. But if your stitches are smaller, then your hat will be a little smaller. And if your stitches are bigger, then your hat will be bigger. So for a hat, we have a lot of wiggle room. And if it's a little bigger or a little smaller, that's fine. But later on, when you're making a sweater, the gauge becomes much more important. Or if you're making something very simple, like a pillow cover, and you need that pillow cover to be 24 inches by 24 inches, gauge becomes important because you don't want it to be, 22 inches and be too small, or like 28 inches and be too big. So, if the exact size becomes very important, that's when gauge will become very important. But for today, we're not going to work on it. We're not going to worry about that. It's not important for today. All right, so for the hat, we're going to cast on 50 stitches. So that's easy, casting on 50 stitches. Row number 1. All right, so there is an asterisk kind of right there at the beginning. So whenever there's an asterisk or parentheses, it becomes very important to pay attention. So knit 2, purl 2, repeat from the asterisk across to the last 2 stitches, and you're going to knit the last 2 stitches. All right. And then the next one, starting with the asterisk, we're going to purl 2 and then knit 2, repeat from the asterisk across to the last 2 stitches, and we're going to purl the last 2 stitches. All right. Sounds easy enough. Repeat rows 1 and 2 until the piece measures about 2 inches from the beginning. Okay. So let's talk about that. What is that trying to tell us? So what you're going to end up doing, if you follow these directions carefully, is you're going to create ribbing. So we're going to be creating this ribbed fabric. You just want to make sure that you're stacking all of your knit stitches on top of knit stitches, and you're stacking your purl stitches on top of purl stitches. So if you see knit stitches, you're going to knit them. And if you see purl stitches, you're going to purl them. So just remember that. Don't just blindly do 2 knits, 2 purls, hoping everything's matching up. Take some extra time and look at what you're doing and make sure that you're stacking knit stitches on top of knit stitches and purl stitches on top of purl stitches. And that will create this nice ribbed texture for you. Okay. So, and then in the next section, we are going to be knitting 1 row and then purling 1 row to make stockinette stitch. All right, that's pretty easy. So the next row we're going to knit, and the next row we're going to purl. And we're going to repeat the last 2 rows until the piece measures about 9 inches from the beginning. Well, that doesn't seem too hard. I think we can do that. So here is one that's in a partial state of completion. I've got my ribbing, and look what I did. I did extra ribbing on this one. So again, you don't have to follow the directions exactly. I like a little extra ribbing, and then it gives you more room if you want to fold it up, or if you don't want to fold it up, it can make your hat a little more slouchy. So don't be afraid to add a little extra. Just don't, make sure you're not going to run out of yarn, but there's always a little bit something extra you can do. And then I've got all my knit stitches on one side and all of my purl stitches on the other side, and that creates stockinette stitch. Okay. And now at this point, okay, 9 inches from the beginning, we're going to cut the yarn, leaving a long tail. So here's my long tail, and we're going to use this tail for seaming. So that's why it's asking you to leave a long tail for seaming. And then we're going to thread the tail onto a blunt needle, and then beginning with the last stitch on the knitting needle, we're going to draw the blunt needle through the remaining stitches, pull together, tightly fasten off, and seam. That sounds like a lot of words, so let's just show you exactly what we're going to do. So we're going to take our large-eyed blunt needle, thread it on to our yarn, okay. And then one at a time, two at a time, just carefully, we're going to transfer these stitches from our knitting needle onto our large-eyed blunt needle. So we're not binding off. So it did not say to bind off. So let me do this. So you can see what I'm doing. You don't have to leave them on the needle. You can kind of pull them down onto the yarn. Try not to unthread your needle if you can avoid it, like I just did. Okay. And make sure you're not splitting your yarn or dropping a stitch. If you drop a stitch like that, that one fell off. Make sure you don't allow it to unravel, because if they unravel, it's not going to make your hat look nice. But you can see, like, if you drop a stitch, it doesn't automatically start unraveling immediately. You'll have time to be able to kind of pick it back up. But just very carefully transfer them over. I'll do this as quick as I can. Any questions while I'm doing this?
How long is a long tail for this hat? Would you say like 16 inches, more, less?
16 to 20. I would err on the side of making it too long. You don't want it so long that it's going to be hard to work with and get in a tangle, but you certainly don't want to run out. Let me hold on. After I do this, I'll measure it and see about how long I have mine. Yeah, but you definitely don't want it to be, don't skimp on this, but don't make it like 5 yards and make it, crazy. You don't want to have that either. What would you say, like about 16 or 20, like you said, Claire?
Yeah, I think somewhere in there is good. Got to make sure you have enough yarn left for a pom-pom.
Yeah, and so once you've got all of your stitches on, you want to pull it. You're going to pull it together it tight. Really tight. Let me do it. So just this much. See, I have about 21 inches here. So mine was probably about 22 or 23 inches to start, but no longer than that. That would start to get too much and you would end up kind of getting it into a tangle. So once you've pulled it together it tightly, and you're going to work from the inside, or yeah, from the wrong side. So turn it inside out, so that the purl stitches are facing, put right sides together, like when seaming. And what we're going to do is we're going to look along the edge, and we're going to find these stitches right here. So they look like knit stitches. They're shaped like V's. So this is our knit stitch. We're going to go under it. And we're going to pick up just two strands of yarn. And then we're going to go to the other side and do the same thing. And we're going to pull it very tight. And when I'm seaming, I kind of like to hold mine like this. So I've got my finger between the two sides. I can kind of keep track of what I'm doing. So I'm going to go under the next knit stitch right there, and then go on this side. This is the running stitch. I'm going back and forth. Now, if you're not good at sewing and if you don't like sewing, the one thing I'm going to tell you is if we follow these knit stitches down, if you can kind of identify them as you're going, and you just pick up 2 strands of yarn and you go straight across and pick up 2 strands of yarn, you'll always be going the same depth. And then if you go right to the next one and you don't really skip any, you'll always have your stitches spaced out the same distance. And if they're all the same depth and they're all spaced out the same distance, then your seam will be very neat. And it's really not, it's not very hard. And now I know seaming and sewing can seem very hard, but this is a nice, gentle little seam to kind of help you practice. And knitted fabric is very forgiving. And if you finish it and the seam looks awful, you made some kind of a horrible mistake, you can take it out and try it again, and the fabric is not going to be ruined. And if your fabric starts to get a little ratty because you've fussed with it too much, all you have to do is kind of get it wet or steam it a little bit, and it'll go right back into shape. You don't have to be, I just did it wrong. Do pay attention to what you're doing and don't unseam like I just did. And just keep going. And then every now and then you might want to kind of give it a little stretch to make sure you're not pulling it too tight. And you can check the inside to make sure it's looking nice. And that's pretty much all there is. Any questions about the seaming?
And that was a running stitch, right?
This is the running stitch. I like the running stitch. I think it's very easy. Very easy. What do you like? How do you like to seam?
If I have to seam, I figure I might as well get a little fancier with it. So I usually do the mattress stitch.
The mattress stitch is a good stitch too. The mattress stitch or the whip stitch. I think this one's a little easier for beginners to kind of see. I do love the mattress stitch too, though. All right, and then when you're done, I'm not going to finish seaming it because I do want to be able to use this for my next class, so I will unseam it. But once you get down to the very bottom, you do want to make, kind of line up a really nice edge so that you're getting a nice little corner there. You don't want it to be like that. Make sure you're getting it really nice. And then you just weave in your ends and turn it the right side out. Before you weave in your ends, though, turn it right side out and just double check and make sure everything looks nice. And if it doesn't look nice, once you weave in your ends, it's hard to take it out. So give it a good check, make sure it looks all right. And then, it's a seam. You might be able to tell that there is a bit of a seam there, but that's okay. Any questions? How do we feel about making this hat? After you practice a bit, you could certainly make this hat by the weekend, or I don't know, this group, I bet you're probably making hats later tonight. Seems like we're pretty advanced here. And then this one I like a big fluffy pom-pom. I put a pom-pom on it. You could sew buttons down it. You could put get a patch and sew on it from your favorite sports team, or any number of things you could do. Put a little furry trim, get some faux fur. All kinds of things you can do to make the hat, more specific to a specific person. So what do you think, Claire?
Yeah, I think hats are a great project for gifts and for experimentation, because even in this pattern, you could make like the ribbing a different color and then match that to your pom-pom or add in some stripes.
Stripes would be fun in it. So yeah, and sometimes a really simple pattern like this can actually be more fun because you can just take a simple pattern and just, do all kinds of interesting things to make it more, more personalized. So, all right, so that's pretty much it. Oh, it's 5:01. We just barely went 1 minute over. So that makes me feel more like myself. I usually go over class.
Yes, we always get very talkative.
All right, so if anyone does have any questions going forward, and sometimes you don't have questions until like once you get it in your hand and you start trying to make it. So feel free to contact me on Instagram or on Facebook. So on Instagram, my Instagram name is Mr. Woolly Bear. It's Mister spelled out. Maybe Claire will put that in the chat. And then for Facebook, it's just my name, and you'll see my picture, so you'll know it's me. Just send me a direct message with any questions you have, and I'll be glad to help you. I don't get many questions, so I don't mind at all. Don't hesitate to ask any questions. Sometimes I can direct you to a YouTube video, or sometimes it's a quick little answer. So just let me know if you need any additional help. So, what are we doing next week, Claire?
Next week, once we've all had a little practice making squares and rectangle shaped items, we're going to learn how to increase and decrease. So you can add a thumb, you can shape the top of that mitten, you can make all sorts of cool shapes.
Yeah. And once you learn how to do this, then you're well on your way to making all kinds of interesting shaped, all kinds of different types of projects. So it's a really good class to have. So, all right. So don't forget to practice and have a great night. We'll see you next week.